Now, welcome back to part three. I hope you had a nice break there. And we're going to get in now and do the last part of our class together today. Now, as you can see on the screen in front of you, I've got this document where I've broken down what to expect or what to prepare for studied drama. And then on the next page, the same thing on studied fiction. And then on the next page, studied poetry. And finally, studied film. So that document is on the PDF there that you have, but I'm not going to read through that. We don't need to read through that. I'm sure you kind of have a good idea already what to expect from each section in terms of preparation. Your teachers are all doing a very good job getting you ready for that. So what I just wanted to do is look at, in this last section, some kind of questions and sample responses in the studied drama, studied fiction, and studied film sections of the paper. And if I get a chance, I'll look at all of them. I probably won't, but I'd also like to look at an unseen comprehension, or sorry, a creative writing task as well before we get to the end of the class. We'll see how we go. But don't forget, as I said, if I don't get stuff covered today, it's all on the platform, and then the weekly classes and so on, and I throw stuff up on YouTube. You'll be grand, okay? So what I'm going to do now, I wrote down the page number, is I'm going to get all the way up to page 45. And I want to just look at this question on studied film, okay? So here it is here. So how would you cope with this? Now, as you know, there are lots of different films prescribed for study. What I've done here is I've written 3 answers. 1 to the film Man on Wire, 1 to the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and 1 to Sing Street. And I'm only going to look at one sample answer really, really quickly. But remember, when they ask you about film, they're going to ask you to think about or to write about a key scene in the film, okay? This is from last year's exam. A key scene that has a powerful atmosphere. Now, remember in the last part of our class where they talked about a poem, where they said that, you like the poem or what it is about the imagery in the poem, and then why you like it. So again, look at the structure here. So a scene that has a powerful atmosphere and the ways in which the filmmakers created the atmosphere. Now, in the section of the class where we looked at poetry, I talked about techniques. I talked about the fact that poets employ similes and onomatopoeia and metaphors and symbols and figurative language and meter and rhyming and all these different things in order to create imagery. So in the same way, what you're supposed to be studying in film, I'm not sure how many teachers are really doing this with students in film, what you're supposed to be doing in film is looking at not just the story, but what the filmmaker does to make that story interesting through that genre. A genre is a style of storytelling. So like, how is a film different from a play? How is a play different from a novel? That's what's called understanding of genre. So this was an interesting question. I liked it. It was worth 20 marks. So I think that's important. So 1 paragraph definitely wouldn't have been enough here. 2 good paragraphs would get you close. 3, I think, would be really a really good response. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the sample that I've written we'll do Sing Street. I know a lot of students study Sing Street. And we'll read this answer, and then I'm going to grade it and tell you where I think it would come out in terms of grade outcomes. So, of course, there are basic things you're supposed to know. Obviously, the name of your film. The director, I think, is really important to make sure you know the name of the director of your film. If you're doing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, by the way, there are 3 directors. The one I always refer is Peter Ramsey because it's the simplest and easiest name to remember. Sorry for slugging out a bit of coffee and my drink throughout the classes, but I have to keep myself, as I said, hydrated. And then have a key scene. Now, I would always recommend to look at the way your film opens, to look at the way your film ends, and then have a key scene or 2 key scenes in the middle that you can describe and talk about the techniques employed. So let's have a look at this and see the quality. Now, just again to remind you before I get into it, the question was asking, about a scene which has a powerful atmosphere and what the filmmaker does to create that atmosphere. That is vital, okay? So, here we go. Confronting the bully is one of the most important scenes in Sing Street. Now, so there we go. Good habits. We talked already, didn't we, today, about opening with topic sentences. So I can feel that this student is confident. They've done their prep work. They know what they want to say when they come across a question like this, because this is not their first time at the rodeo. They've practiced. So we've got to focus on the word seen, and we've got the specific scene that their student is writing about. Connor is challenged by the school bully Barry, who has made his life miserable since he joined school. So if he's made his life miserable, that's relevant to atmosphere. However, the scene shows that Connor has changed. He is stronger and no longer feels threatened by Barry. And again, that change is reflective of the mood or the tone of the scene. The director ensures that all the characters are dressed, and here we go, in appropriate costumes, a school uniform, and shot the scene in a real schoolyard. So again, the location of the scene. This adds a real sense of authenticity, making you think it's good. So don't forget, the question is asking about whether or not the scene has a powerful atmosphere. If it feels authentic and realistic, well, that's relevant to atmosphere. Dialogue is also used effectively, especially when the confident Connor tells Barry, maybe you are living in my world, I'm not living in yours. So excellent use of evidence, and you can clearly see that the student has gone to great troubles to prepare this scene. The dialogue also contains colloquial language. Again, another technique. If you don't know what that means like slang, where language is kind of informal and is delivered in an informal way. Barry's friend calls him a spanner, and Barry threatens to batter Connor. And again, you've got these lovely examples of preparation. This student really is good because they're not just saying. He uses colloquial language to then give two examples. A spanner is like a Dublin term for a fool, and to batter somebody is to beat them up. This attention to detail in the choice of costumes, setting, and dialogue certainly create a realistic and tense atmosphere in the scene. Now remember the criteria for assessment that we went through in the first section of this class. Remember focus, remember coherence, remember, actually, do you know what I'll do really quickly? Remember expression. Let's just really quickly just lash back to them and remind ourselves what they were. Focus, is what you're writing relevant? Ideas, are you able to explain these concepts and how these techniques help create the atmosphere? Development, are you using evidence and quotation or key moment reference into support of your points? Is it coherent? Does the paragraph feel like it's properly knitted together? Is the expression controlled? All of those things are evident in this paragraph. All of them. And you're reading it going, okay, this student is good. Now, could it be better? Yeah. Has anybody ever written anything that's perfect? No. Even like my favorite poem, which is called The Windhover. I'm sure Gerard Manley Hopkins, who wrote The Windhover, would look at it and go, I changed this or I changed that, could be better. Even my favorite book of all time, which is called King Lear, I'm sure Shakespeare, if he was around, would look at it and go, it's a bit long, I could have taken this out, or I would have added this in or chosen that word. English is like that, folks. There is no such thing as perfection or the right answer. But it's an answer which makes a good impression on an examiner. An answer which is focused. An answer which is coherent. An answer which is supported by evidence, and the points are developed and explained, and the language is controlled. and there's evidence of preparation, and it's been reread to eliminate basic errors. Second paragraph, the director, and this is really important for film, also makes effective use of camera shots and sound effects to heighten the atmosphere. Again, never forgetting the question. Close-up shots are used to show Barry's annoyance and Connor's confidence. As the scene ends, there's a tracking shot, which shows Connor moving past Barry, who stands stock still. The tracking shot is symbolic, as it represents change. It signals a change in atmosphere from tension to triumph, and this is then reinforced by the sound of the school bell, another technique, which signals both the end of the scene and the end of Barry's reign as a bully. Now, there are 20 marks going for that question. How do I judge the quality? I use my criteria for assessment. Now, you know what they are. My criteria, Paul's criteria, are the Rice rules. If I decide that this is a low quality response, I'm going to give it somewhere between 8 and 10, or even 8 and 11. Out of 20, because that is an achieved grade. If I decide it's decent, sorry, 8 out of 10, because 11 is 55, isn't it? Apologies. It is 8 or 10. Very rarely will you get somebody scoring below 8 in a question like this. Now, if I decide that it's better than that, but it's problematic, and I'll talk about the different reasons why now in a second, then I can give it anywhere between 11 and 14. If it's 11 or 14, it's a merit. So 11 is 55%, 14 is 70%. If I think it's better than, you know, the average student's work, if I think it stands out as being like more prepared, more detailed, with greater depth of explanation, well, I might give it somewhere between 15, 15 and 18, 17 out of 20. Because 15 is 75%, that's your starting point for your higher merit, and 17 is 85%. And if I think it's distinction level, I give it between 18 and 20. Now, do I decide it's definitely not distinction because there's only 2 paragraphs and there's 20 marks going? I don't do that. Do I decide it's an achieved grade? Well, no. It's focused on the question. It's clearly paragraphed. It's well written. So it's not achieved. What about merit? It definitely deserves a merit. What about higher merit? Does it have good ideas? Well, yeah. Talks about the tracking shots, but how it's used to show Barry's annoyance. It talks about, the close-up shot. It talks about the tracking shot, which kind of symbolizes change. That's a very higher order concept. It talks about how shooting the scene in a real schoolyard gives the scene a sense of authenticity. So it really does. This kid is operating at a high level. There's little quotes in there. It doesn't just say that dialogue is used. It says that dialogue is used including colloquial language, and then it gives examples of colloquial language, and you're going, okay, that's really good as well. Does it explain how these things impact the atmosphere enough? You could probably say, well, it needs a little bit more of that. A little bit more of explaining why these things, instead of saying it impacts the atmosphere, a little bit more of explaining how it impacts the atmosphere. In terms of expression, very controlled, very clear, good vocabulary, excellent punctuation. So it's definitely in the market at the higher end. What do I give it? If I'm marking it, I give it a 17. It's not quite distinction quality. Why not? I just mentioned a moment ago. It does so many things. To get 85% in any assessment is super, excellent. But I just mentioned there that a number of times the writer says, this creates a realistic and tense atmosphere. I've said, this heightens the atmosphere. But I don't really, I think enough, the answer, the student, the candidate, the response, doesn't really explain how enough for distinction level. Now that's been really hard because this is extremely good work. But just to get that distinction, could do maybe a sentence or two more explanation, or maybe a third paragraph in which the writer just thinks about the atmosphere in the scene a bit more, just a little bit more. So really, really good response. And what I'm saying to you is, do you know your key scene as well as that? Can you refer to? Have you got it within your ability level to refer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different aspects of the technique of the filmmaker in your key scene? If you haven't, then you're not as well prepared as this student, and this student got a higher merit. So you have to, when you look at your key scenes, what key scene did I do from Spider-Man? Or would have been the Leap of Faith scene. You look at your key scene. What one did I do from the brilliant they're all brilliant movies, Man on Wire. I did the opening. Whatever you're seeing, have it ready. Opening scene, I think the ending of your film as well, and your chosen kind of central important scene. But be able to talk about not just what happens in the scene. And you can see that the student who wrote about Sing Street really was able to talk in great detail about what happened in the confronting the bully scene. But they were also able to talk about how the filmmaker made that scene memorable. That's the game. That's what you have to try to do when it comes to studying your studied film. So hopefully you found that in some way useful. Now let's move on and talk about study drama. So again, practice, practice, practice. There's a whole selection of different plays that you could be studying. Teacher's going to pick one Shakespeare play and look at another play. It is possible that they could specifically ask you to write about your Shakespeare play. That has happened. But so has this. Look at this question. Choose a play you have studied in which a character's behavior reveals something to the audience about their strengths and or weaknesses. Now, importantly here, it says a play. It does not say a Shakespearean play. Now, I got to make this clear to you. If you're panicking now listening to me saying, my teacher has only done The Merchant of Venice or Much Ado About Nothing or whatever the play is, has only done my Shakespeare play, we haven't read another play. It's extremely, extremely unlikely that you're going to be asked to write about 2 plays in your junior cycle. I mean, like the infinitesimal chance of that. It could happen, which is why, as a good teacher, I would always prepare 2 plays, but it's unlikely, so don't panic too much. And one of the things you can do, and I've done this in the past depending on the class, is just look at kind of key scenes from plays. So last year, for example, the play that I did with my students was Julius Caesar, because I absolutely love Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. Some of you, I hope, are studying that play. So we knew Julius Caesar, we read the play, and then we focused in on the key scenes, and we knew it inside out, upside down, and backwards. But then when we got into 3rd year, I spent a week just reading some of the key speeches from Merchant. Some of the key Shylock speeches, and gave them a sense of, and watched a couple of scenes on the video from the play. And that was enough. That was enough to cover us. So you don't have to have done a second play in the same detail as the first play, I suppose. So let's have a look at this. So I decided to write so much about Shakespeare, and I talk so much about particularly Merchant of Venice and Julius Caesar, that I decided I'd do this answer on a non-Shakespearean play that's prescribed for study, and that's 12 Angry Men by Reginald Rose, which is a great play. Now, I just want to, again, look at this. And again, it doesn't matter if you're not studying this, no more than it matters whether you're studying Blackberry Picking or whether it matters if you're studying Sing Street or Man on Wire or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse or Little Women, whatever your film is. These are just, look at the questions, think about the structure of the answers, and good practice. So, this question here was worth 25 marks. So it's a big chunk of marks out of 180, 25 is. And it was broken up into two sections. Part A, with reference to at least one key moment from your studied play. So it says at least one key moment, which is opening the door to write about two if you want to. Explain what the behavior of your chosen character, and don't forget you have to pick a character who has strengths and weaknesses, reveals about their strengths and weaknesses. So it's an easy question. If you go and you look at Merchant, and you look at, let's say, this scene here. You all know this scene if you're studying Merchant, where Shylock talks about, has a Jew not eyes, has not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, if you prick us, do we not bleed? You all know that. And then at the end, this famous quote, the villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. In other words, you've taught me to be nasty, I'm going to show you what nasty is. So if you're studying Merchant, I know you know that speech. I know you've learned quotes from that speech, and you know what's happening in that speech. That speech shows Shylock's strengths, but also his weaknesses. It shows how articulate he is. It shows how able he is to express himself in forceful and direct language. It shows how determined he is, how resilient he is. He's suffered such abuse, and yet he won't be crushed and won't be defeated by it. So loads of strengths. But his weaknesses, from our point of view, is his bitterness, his desire for vengeance, his determination to make Antonio suffer, because that's what drives him to his tragic conclusion. So if you just had that speech ready, there's a key moment. You would have been able to answer this question. Hope that makes sense. Now, get back to where we were. Sorry, no. There's a Shakespearean. I'm on the wrong page. Now, so, page 47 or 8, I think we're on, aren't we? Yep. There we go. So what I've done here, so part A is a moment in which the behavior reveals strengths or weaknesses. And then part B, in your opinion, did your chosen character's strengths or weaknesses help to make them a more realistic character? Now remember we talked in the Marcus game about ideas. Now here you had 25 marks. The first part was worth 10 marks. Okay? And the second part is worth 15. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to write more for the second part. It means that the second part is a more difficult and challenging question. So the vast majority of students will have very little trouble dealing with a key moment which shows a character's strengths or weaknesses. That's essentially tell the story. So they're kind of giving you marks because they don't want anybody to fail. Okay? They don't want anyone to fail. But the second part, which is worth 15 marks, that's the one that's more challenging because they also want to make it difficult to score top grades. So whether you're doing 12 Angry Men or Julius Caesar or The Merchant of Venice, or whatever your play is, you still should be able to handle that first question easily. Pick up those 10 marks, which will get you a pass, and then see how well you deal with the second half of the question. And again, I hate this stuff where people are always talking about distinctions. For most of us, it's about scoring, improving our grade a little bit. You're doing your junior cycle. You want to get better. You want to get better so that you're well set for your Leaving Cert. And then when you go into your life, you're able to show those critical thinking skills. Be analytical, articulate your opinion, deliver your points in a forceful and organised way. These are the skills we're trying to encourage you to develop in this exam. In this subject. Let's have a quick look at these two samples and see are they any good. And again, what grade would they get? So let's read it. So this should be an answer which shows a key moment where a character shows strengths or weaknesses and you're able to explain what the strengths or weaknesses were. So, if you know 12 Angry Men, all the characters are just called juror number, and then it's actually 2 to 12 because one of them is called the foreman. Again, you don't have to have read this play to see how good this answer is or how weak this answer is. Juror number 8 is described by the playwright as a quiet, thoughtful gentleman who seeks the truth and wants justice to be done. Now, ask yourself, what impression do I get of you as a candidate if you can open with a sentence like that? I think you're prepared. I think you're determined. I think you've done the work. I'm impressed by you. Great quote. Prepare one character from your play really well. Talk about their relationships with one other character, conflict or loving relationship. For example, if you're talking about Merchant, I do Shylock, I'd always have a couple of quotes to show his relationship with Antonio and a couple of quotes to show his relationship with Jessica. So if they ask you about that, you can talk about it. These qualities are strengths in his character. Are clear throughout the play 12 Angry Men. A key moment which illustrates this truth occurs when he votes against the conviction in Act 1 of the play. Now, I think that's a great paragraph. Tells me about this character, identifies the key moment, talks about the strengths, it's focused on the question, it has a quotation in it to show you know your stuff. Super paragraph. And then you segue into part B of your answer by explaining what happens in this scene. He alone feels that there is reasonable doubt about the accused boy's guilt, and he expresses his belief in passionate language, saying, second quote, it's possible that the boy lost his knife, and it's possible that someone else stabbed his father with a similar knife. It's possible. Great use of quotation. This student has really prepared their play very well. The repetition, now they're talking using techniques of it's possible, not only serves, now look what's happening here, not only serves to emphasize his point, but also proves the man's strengths. He is brave and willing to stand up and fight for justice. It is not easy to stand alone, and it is also difficult to convince people who already have their mind made up. Juror number 8's behaviour in this key moment proves he's a man of strength, a man of principle, a man of determination. Now, if you want to see a perfect example of the Rice rules, the type of writing that English teachers go, woohoo, we love it, then there's an example. Relevant to the question, you better believe it. Informed by study and learning, look at the use of quotation. Written in language which is clear and easy to read with no basic errors in spelling or punctuation, absolutely. And thoughtful, explained. Remember in the marking scheme it said ideas? Look at the ideas here. You're not just saying he has strengths, you're saying what the strengths are. He's brave, he's willing to stand up, he's willing to fight, he's able to convince people of his point of view. He's a man of principle, a man of determination. Look at all that work that candidate is doing. And then look at the guy who's going to get the achieved or maybe should get a higher merit but only gets a merit, because they just say, and this shows the juror's strengths. So the degree to which you can tease out your points, the ability that you have to just bring the point that little bit further, that could be the difference. But again, think about the basics. This candidate knows their play. Do you know your play? This candidate knows their quotes. Do you know your quotes? This candidate knows how to write a paragraph with a topic sentence, followed by evidence, followed by explanation. They've got a process for writing paragraphs. Do you have a process for writing paragraphs? So this is why somebody is scoring well. That's a 10 out of 10 answer, without any question whatsoever. You read that and you go, okay, that's easy. That doesn't challenge me in terms of grading. So they've got those, basic marks in the back pocket. Okay, so they've passed, because 10 is 40% of 25. Now, you've set yourself up. You have your platform. How are you going to deliver with the harder question? In your opinion, did your chosen character's strengths or weaknesses help make them a more realistic character? The way, that's what we call, sorry now. That's what's called a higher order question. So if you find questions like that difficult, guess what? You're normal. They're just, it's the high jump in the Olympics, and the lads are getting ready to go and do the high jump, right? Where's the bar set initially? It's set low. But then as the bar gets raised a bit, it's harder to get over the bloody thing. Doesn't mean you don't try. So when it comes to this exam, pick up the low-hanging fruit. Pick up the easy marks for the easy questions, like that first one. And then just do your best with the questions that you find trickier. Let's have a look at this and think about the quality. I'd love you to think about the quality here. So again, what have we got here in this sentence? I definitely believe that juror number 8 is a realistic character. Really good topic sentence. Little error there, technical error. Let me show it to you. So if it's, sorry. If it's the name of a character, it should have a capital J, even if it's not their proper name. In the play, he's juror number 8, so a capital J. Little things like that. Now, the examiner's not going to ever, hammer you for that, but just little things like that. If they creep in and there's lots of them, it will detract from the quality. And I go, oh, that's really, the student is doing really, really well. Great ideas, great focus, great coherence. But you know what? Just not disciplined enough in the way they present their work. I'm not giving them a distinction. I'm not giving them a higher merit. These are the factors that they're the calculus you go in when you're thinking about awarding grades. There are people in the world who will be brave and stand up for what they believe to be right. So you're saying realistically, there is. Now you're saying that, so okay, give me an example. This is clear from my study of history when I learned about people like Martin Luther King, John Hume, and Mary Robinson. So they're all people that you study in the junior cycle history course. There are not many people who would act like juror number 8 when he says, and again, lovely quote, I want to call for a vote. I want you 11 men to vote by secret ballot. If there are 11 votes for guilty, I won't stand alone. We'll take in a guilty verdict right now. His strengths, coming back to the question all the time, his bravery and his determination are clearly evident in this moment. And I believe this makes him a more realistic character. Back to the question. Really, really strong quality response. Now, I want to just, again, shoot back to the introduction where I have the chief examiner's instructions to the people marking the scripts. Just want to check what page that is, page 50. So I'll know where to come back really quickly. Remember this, guys. Do you remember this? Ideas. The extent to which higher order thinking, complexity of ideas, originality of thought are shown Now, you will get lots of teachers who will say to you, what the hell are you doing referring to John Hume, Mary Robinson and Martin Luther King in an English answer? That's history. That's not relevant. The point is, it is relevant to that particular question because it asked about realism and they're real world characters. And I'm correcting work. I've been correcting work from students from first year to sixth year for the last 27, nearly 28 years. When I come across somebody who can make a reference like that and not go off on a bloody tangent and start telling me the story of Martin Luther King or Mary Robinson or John Hume, but actually just give me that example to make the point that, yeah, he is realistic, I'm going. Because the idea, the reference is original and it shows a really good, complex understanding of the question under discussion. It's for me, when I'm reading students' work, often it feels like they're like in a straitjacket and they're afraid to say things. There's this, if you were in my classroom in the school I work in full time, I have this poster on the wall and it says this, right? Sorry, wrong pen. It says this. And I have a big red X drawn through it. It stands for fear of sounding stupid. As an English teacher, I'm sure your English teachers do this, I'm always trying to provoke conversation. I'm always saying, what do you think of that? This is what I think. What do you think? And I'm always trying to show them what I think, but telling them, you don't have to agree with me. And then you get people saying, I know this is a stupid question, but, or this is a stupid point, but, and I go, no. There's no such thing as a stupid point. Throw it out there. If it doesn't make sense when you've said it out loud, if you can't tease it out, grand, you had a go. That's what English is. Yeah, you have to have done your study. Has this kid done their study? Yeah, they know their play. They're writing from a point from a position of confidence. They know their play. But then they're writing in a way which is original, realistic. Well, he's brave. Well, here's a couple of brave people because I study history as well. And so therefore, if he's brave, he's standing up, and these people stand up, that's realistic. It's a really good sign in a student that there's no fear of sounding stupid. They're just willing to be original when they answer questions, while always remembering to remain focused and not, as I said, to wander off and start talking about something that's not relevant to the question under discussion. So I thought, because I'm conscious of time now, I'm panicking here because we've got very little time left. So I thought that would be of use. Yeah, where is ours? There we go. So, second paragraph. It is also true, so separate point, separate paragraph is an important rule to remember, to say that juror number 8's strength comes from his knowledge and education. So again, that's a good point. And again, it's asking, is he realistic? And you know, the more knowledgeable you are, the more educated you are, the stronger you are. When he speaks, he is confident because he knows what he's talking about. And again, if you're going to say something, give me evidence. I want evidence. A great example of this is when he tells the other jurors, again, if you've done the work, it's so much easier to write the answers. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. That's in the Constitution. He knows the law and his situation, and in this situation, his knowledge makes him powerful and confident. And if he's powerful and confident, what are they? They are strengths. This is definitely a strength, and you tie it back again. And that makes him realistic. I know that I feel much more confident when I am talking about something about which I am informed. Folks, There's 15 marks going for that. You've only written 2 paragraphs. Does that mean you can't get 15 out of 15? No, it doesn't mean that. 15 marks, and I'm asking myself, right, did the student answer the question? Strength and or weaknesses make them realistic. Yes, ironclad focus on realistic. Did they do it in a way which was informed? Yes, they'd done the study. They were able to put quotes. There was a quote in the first paragraph. There was a quote in the second paragraph. So their work is evidence-based. Is it coherent? Well, yeah, it is coherent because there's 2 paragraphs and they make separate but connected points. They're both about the question, why he's realistic. So that's connected. But one of them is about how he's brave, like these historical figures. And the other one's about how it's his education that makes him strong. So they're 2 separate points, but they're connected to the overall question under discussion. Separate but connected. Is the language and expression controlled? Yeah. Are the ideas, original and complex? Yeah. Are there any basic errors? There's one little tiny error. I know your teachers will tell you there's no such thing as a guaranteed distinction. For me, if I'm reading that, that's getting up close. So look, we're out of time. I really hope that you found today's classes, I suppose, is that what we're doing, because I broke it up into 3 sections, in some way useful, gave you some ideas. If I can just say one thing to you, don't hate English. It's a great subject. Do your prep. Have a look at the notes. Now, again, we've looked at some pages of the notes, but there's other stuff I've given you there with the breakdown of what to expect from each section. And then maybe have a look at the YouTube. PMC Brunner English on YouTube. Sorry, I never put the English part. And then if you like what you saw, if you like this class, then join us on the platform and you'll see there's plenty of material there that you can use to help you with your revision. So in the meantime, happy Christmas, happy New Year, good luck in your exams, and thank you very much for attending.